from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians. When I came to you, brothers and sisters, proclaiming the mystery of God, I did not come with sublimity of words or of wisdom, for I resolved to know nothing while I was with you, except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I came to you in weakness and fear and much trembling, and my message and my proclamation were not with persuasive words of wisdom, but with a demonstration of spirit and power, so that your faith might rest not on human wisdom, but on the power of God. The word of the Lord.
Our second reading for this Sunday comes from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians. In the first reading from Isaiah, we saw how acts of charity and justice are really a testimony to God's glory, the God who is love, who is light of the world. Now, in the second reading, we find St. Paul talking about another way of witnessing to God, and that is through preaching. Wow, huh? So we have a beautiful combination. In the first reading, actions of justice and love, witness to God. Now, St. Paul, through his apostolic preaching, also witnesses to God. But let us see how his apostolic preaching becomes light, becomes a witness of light. He says, in his preaching, the focus is only Jesus, the one crucified. St. Paul was very clear about his mission, about the whole point of his preaching. His preaching was to make people hear about Jesus, the one sent by God, the one crucified, the one who died for us, the one who rose from the dead for us. His preaching is all about Jesus. And as a witness to Christ, St. Paul says, I do not proclaim the message of Christ bearing wise argumentation. I don't bring with me human wisdom. In other words, St. Paul knows where a witness should place himself or herself. A witness should not compete with the message. And in this case, the message is the glory of God in Jesus Christ. So it is not his own glory that St. Paul is interested in. It is the glory of God that must shine forth in his preaching as a witness. And so he says, I come to you as a preacher with fear, with trepidation. St. Paul is very much aware of his weaknesses, of his limitations. And in many parts of his letter to the Corinthians, he admits his past life of sinfulness, his rigidity, his narrowness of mind. He brings all of this, the weakness of an apostle. And for him, there is a value to that. His weakness becomes a tool so that the power of God, the wisdom of God, the glory of God in the crucified one would be more clearly palpable or seen by people. The witness does not compete with the one he or she is witnessing to. Now, St. Paul is very happy that the Corinthians were able to receive the Word of God, the glory of God in Jesus, through the preaching of a humble, sinful apostle. Why? He is happy because he says the faith of the Corinthians now rests not on the wisdom of St. Paul, but on the wisdom of God. In other words, the faith of the Corinthians has a sure basis. The sure basis is the glory of God manifested in Jesus crucified. Yeah, that's right. Imagine if the faith of people rests on the brilliance of Paul. Imagine what happens to the church if the faith of people really rests on the good looks of the apostle. Nako, bagsak, hindi yan tunay na pananampalataya. Imagine if the faith of a community rests on the skill and the eloquence of a good preacher. Now, eloquence in itself is quite good, but imagine if that is the power that people believe in and not the glory of God. Then, when that skill disappears, the people's faith will also disappear. So we have here a good combination. The first reading talking about witness through acts of justice and charity, revealing to people the just and loving God. In St. Paul, the humble preaching of an apostle, focused on the wisdom of God, also testifies to the wisdom of God in Jesus crucified.